Good morning, everybody. Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield here. Let's talk a little bit about what is going to be coming up on today's show. We got old faces in new places. We're talking all these guys, their new homes. Thank God for podcasts, right? We got a lot of good content from these dudes about their new teams. We'll get into that. And then America, baby. We're talking Team USA. Vincent Goodwill going to join us in hour 2 to talk hoops. Can't wait to get into that. And then finally, I don't even know how to get into this one. I'm just going to say open mic. Mike Gundy made some questionable comments about one of his star players' recent arrest. We'll talk more about that in today's show. Let's get to it.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Jesse Cofield, and Jason Fitz filling in for my father, Mike Golic Sr. today. You guys can check him out over at Yahoo Sports, hosting a bunch of great content there, as well as Fox Sports Radio here on the weekends. We're going to have a fun show for you guys today. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings network. And we will get to, as Jesse mentioned, some old faces in new places. Some very strong reaction yesterday to our love for Cooper Flagg and what's going on with Team USA, how we actually sort out that roster as we get ready to watch them play some basketball in the lead up to the Olympics, and plenty of college football news, as Jesse mentioned. But first off, yes, my dad not on the show today. He is getting ready to travel out to Lake Tahoe. Jason, you have been a part of, back when we were at ESPN, some of those golf trips that we got to take when we were doing the morning show. You saw my dad get the budding golf bug, and now he heads out for his second year at the American Century Classic tournament in Lake Tahoe, and he is determined to be the most improved this year. So how confident are you, knowing my dad, that he's going to be able to make this jump?
Not at all, number one. But number two, can I tell you that I have deep-rooted sadness in my heart for that golf tournament. I think it's that one because the Bay Perry played the whatever the celebrity tournament is in Lake Tahoe. So it's got to be that one. We played it, and I'll never forget. Aaron Rodgers was there, right? Aaron Rodgers sitting 3 rows back, and he's sitting there, and this is single Aaron Rodgers at the time, sitting 3 rows back. He's got a couple of just absolutely beautiful women next to him. It's fine. I'm walking out on stage and I'm thinking, yeah, man, that's Aaron Rodgers. I'm still in the music business. We opened our show with the song called Done, right? So I go out to the end of the stage, and this is how we opened every show, just like we did on the ACM Awards. Toughest fiddle solo I've ever played in my life. We all walk out to the edge of the stage. We get in one single line and we jump up and down. We jump up and down while I play the toughest fiddle solo I've ever had to play standing, but I do it while I'm jumping up and down. Proud of that, right? Like when I used to go to schools, kids would ask, how do you jump up and down? I'd have to show them. I worked tirelessly on this. So I walk out to the edge of the stage. I make eye contact with Aaron Rodgers. I start jumping up and down. I go through the whole solo. What's he do at the end? Sits back in his chair, crosses his legs, and goes, yeah, that's what I got. I got to, yeah. And I listened back to the recording because we recorded every show. I played the hell out of that solo. And I got, man. So I'm waiting for the day that I could be in a crowd. And this all came from Tahoe. See? I'm waiting for the day I can be in the crowd, watch Aaron Rodgers throw a game-winning touchdown, and I can go, nah.
Wow, that's really, you've been carrying that with you, man.
I can't imagine someone with a more burdened therapist than Jason Fitz.
I was going to say, do you
because the way you hold on to these moments.
Yeah, does that wake you up in the middle of the night?
No. But every time he throws an interception, I go, huzzah. I'm just saying, let's face it. Athletes and musicians share this.
Time have done to Aaron Rodgers not make you feel a little bit better considering everything that's gone on in the last few years? I mean, hell, just turn on Danica Patrick's YouTube channel and watch her talk about lizard people there, and it should make you feel a little bit better about everything, right?
Look, it does. But Mike, you know this, athletes and musicians, we've learned this in our friendship over the years. There's a lot of commonality between the wiring of someone that makes it in sports and the wiring of someone that makes it in music. I would argue that part of that commonality is holding grudge. There was a period in my life where I had in my wallet a list of every person that had ever turned me down for a record deal in case I ever got to give an acceptance speech. And I was just going to roll through them and be like, hey, I'd like to take this moment. I'm not going to thank anybody. I'd like to take this moment to say, I told you so to the following people. Unfortunately, They were right. I never got to do that, so they obviously knew what they were doing.
It's giving Arya Stark. What do you fall asleep every night by the fire, like reading your list of names? Like, yeah.
Well, it's giving NFL wide receiver. Like, I feel like Jason is every wideout that gets interviewed after the draft who can rattle off from memory the name of every receiver that was drafted before them and go, it is cute that you thought you'd ever get to give an acceptance speech. That was a fun dream.
Yeah, well, especially since we both know I can't read, so I would have botched it in the middle of that thing. Like, I go full Charlie Day trying to read anything, so it wouldn't have been even complete sentences. I would have embarrassed myself even more.
Wow. All right. So we've learned today that Jason Fitz very much wired like an NFL wide receiver, even if I'd imagine the vertical on those jumps on stage at Lake Tahoe was probably not more than you were able to slide. Your vertical was probably around what mine was at Pro Day. And at the very worst, I trained for that and still couldn't jump over 30 inches. So you've at least got that on your side, that I know you were doing some training for that, but only so much, especially with how tight I imagine the pants were back at that point.
Look, okay, the jeans, like everybody asks, am I going to get back in the music business? I ain't putting my butt back in those jeans ever. So, number one. Number two, Mike, just go look. You can Google it during the break. Look, Jason Fitz ACM Awards or Van Perry ACM Awards done. Just look that up. Go about 2 minutes in. You'll see the fiddle solo. The jumps were fire. The jumps were good. I'm just saying, it was for me, for little old me. I was pretty content with that. It's my athleticism shining.
All right, you know what? We're going to see if anyone can match that intensity at Tahoe this year, because the one thing I found out last year, there's like a party the night before one of the rounds for all of the golfers and their families. It's a very like intimate, closed off party, but they've done a karaoke contest there for some of the celebrities in the last few years. Alfonso Rivera won last year, but before that, Travis Kelce had won 3 years running, and he is supposed to be there again, as is his brother Jason Kelce. Travis is recently, I don't know if you guys have seen, through a relationship, found his way into an incredibly musical power couple, and so I wonder if he will have the courage to karaoke one of Taylor Elizabeth Swift's songs on stage there in Lake Tahoe, as I see Jason shake his head.
This is the problem. Like, big guys get up at karaoke and all they have to do is be funny and they'll win. Like, he doesn't have to be musical. Like, when you get up and do karaoke, people are just amazed that Shrek can sing. So like, all of a sudden it's like, what?
Shrek 5
everybody's got to be into it. I mean, I'm just go check it out in theaters. Yeah. Like, if you're a little guy, you got to get out. Like, you better hit every note if you're a little guy, because people look up the minute you start singing, especially if you're a pretty good singer. People are like, all right, you better show me something. Mike goes out there. All he has to do is shake his no-nos, and all of a sudden people are like,
well, yes, people are going to expect you to be pretty good because you were a professional musician. It's not really, that's not fair. Karaoke from a professional musician's not fair.
But even if you don't know that, I'm just saying, if we just walked into a karaoke bar together and people don't know anything about either of us, we give an equal performance, Mike is going to win because they feel like, they're like, look at the big guy. Like, Kelsey's going to win because they're like, look at the big guy and all his personality.
I will say, and by the way, it's Taylor Allison Swift. I'm so sorry, Swifties. But no, you're right. He does have incredible energy on stage. I do remember that much. But you're right, Jason. There is, it's not a tax necessarily, but there is a certain amount of grading on a curve when it comes to being big. I always said that in college. I was 300 pounds, and I couldn't dance well, but I could carry rhythm enough that being a 300-pound white guy, my teammates were constantly stunned anytime I displayed some modicum of rhythm on the dance floor. So you're not wrong about that phenomenon. It's it's the thing we get in return for not being able to fit comfortably into planes the way you and the wee folk do. And so I feel like that's an appropriate trade-off here. And I feel like this is probably an appropriate juncture for me to say, let's talk about some sports. And we will get back and check in plenty at Lake Tahoe over the next few days. Me and Dad are going to be out there doing shows, and we'll have plenty. Stu Gatz is supposed to be out there. He's coming to and from, I think, Grateful Dead shows in Las Vegas. So God help us all, and whatever that turns into when we get there. But in the meantime, Jason, as we talk about all of this, this loosely qualifies as old faces in new places. And that's exactly what we've had so far in this NBA offseason. And I'm curious for you, because you and I haven't been on air to talk about this much. As you've seen a lot of this player movement this offseason, specifically a guy like Klay Thompson, who for so many years was a part of this incredible dynasty at Golden State, now moving on, some other big names, Paul George on the move again. Does this make it feel like a real changing of the guard this offseason, or have we already been through that in the NBA with a lot of the stars of old for us?
The problem is I think these are noteworthy moves because we love to pay attention to them. But are they noteworthy moves in the sense that they bring a championship? Like when we were together on air and Paul George went to the Clippers, the real conversation was Kawhi and Paul George. Was this going to be better than the Lakers? Were they going to win chip after chip after chip? And what happens at some point is we fall in love with the brands of individual athletes, which is fine. But does that make you better than Boston? If you look at the way championships have been built of late, it's been the right moves around patience, right? Like, look at what the Nuggets did. Look at what the Celtics did. Look even what the Bucks did when they won their championship. There's the right moves to sprinkle into a patient foundation that comes together. Like, nobody wants to hear that. But I just, as much as I love the thought of Clay being with Kyrie and being with Luka, and we'll pay attention to it, does it suddenly make them the NBA championship favorites next year to me? No, it's just a move that we pay attention to. So for attention's point, I think some of these moves are really interesting. For championships, I just think that we all have to understand that the path to a championship is like barbecue, slow and low in the NBA right now.
And I actually think you could qualify Dallas as that to an extent, as they've tinkered around Luka Doncic for a while, had him as the core. This last year, yeah, it was about an infusion of youth, some things they did at the deadline, and certainly Kyrie Irving ascending back to something resembling the player we got for so many years. But I think the other part of this is an interesting, very human element here. And Klay Thompson talked about this yesterday, the idea that at this juncture, given what the last couple of years had looked like in Golden State, that a fresh start was something that he very much valued when he talked about Dallas.
Coming here is just such a fresh start and feeling just wanted again, and like I bring great value. It just gets me excited to go out there and even work out after this press conference and get shots up. And so, yeah, there was times last year was tough where it wasn't as joyful as it had been in the past. And it's nice to kind of shed that and have a whole new fresh start, whole new group of guys to get to know, and co-workers, so a whole new city. It's really cool, and I'm going to embrace the heck out of this opportunity.
And Jason, I think Klay Thompson kind of does represent what you were talking about there, because it's not a seismic shift in the roster in Dallas. It's not them trying to do what we saw the Phoenix Suns do with Bradley Beal and Kevin Durant, bringing them in alongside Devin Booker, guys that are going to be a foundational element to your team. For a Dallas Mavericks team that's in a hyper-competitive Western Conference, just coming off an NBA Finals appearance, they looked around and said, all right, we got two incredibly competent ball handlers. We need to space with some more shooting. And outside of a couple of bad weeks last year for Klay Thompson, he's still a guy that seems to be able to do that at a pretty high level. And so I would say that does qualify as what you're talking about in terms of team building for championships right now.
That's fair. I think I hadn't thought of it that way. I think you're probably right. And when I hear him say that, I think there's real world application to sometimes what we hear athletes say. And when he talks about a fresh start, man, like you and I have felt this in our lives, right? Like there's a period, there's absolutely no discredit to where I came from. You know how I feel about it. It was an amazing experience, but getting a fresh start at Yahoo for me really re-energized a lot of my life, right? Like, and think about how anybody that's ever changed jobs or moved to a different city, how there's an energizing portion of that can come. So when you hear that, you hear the way he talks about it, the human in me says, man, that makes a lot of sense. And maybe you're right. Maybe I'm putting too much emphasis in the fact that I feel like now we have 3 stars when in fact there are quality pieces to the roster overall. The only question I would ask when it looks at the Mavs moving forward is, while they needed somebody that could take some of that weight off like Klay can, are they just choosing not to ever look at defense? Because, like, let's be real, Klay and Luka are neither one going to make the all defense team.
Well, yeah, Klay not at this juncture anymore. Certainly the back-to-back injuries between the knee and everything else have robbed him of some of the stuff that used to have him in range of being all the NBA defender and constantly talked about that way on the wing. So, no, listen, there's absolutely part of that that's still worth doing. And listen, a lot of their future is going to boil down to, in critical moments, and we saw in the NBA Finals, this is the case, is Luka going to trust those other guys enough? It worked all the way in the lead up, but when Boston decided to make their game plan isolate Luka, all of a sudden we saw him default to some of those same old tactics. But I don't know, it just, this move rings a little bit different to me than the other big move we've talked about this offseason, where you look at the Sixers and Paul George, something that everyone's gotten excited about, that feels a lot more like, hey, we're trying to take this wild swing to microwave success in a way that we've seen. You know, look at what we saw with Dame Lillard in Milwaukee last year, certainly the Suns that we referenced, that it's a lot harder than we give it credit for. Even, I mean, I'd say post Miami Big Three, but even they had had trouble with it early on. And so you do worry about Philadelphia, who now we go, all right, well, this is part of your quick window to try and make this happen before Embiid's body gives out. It's like, hey, it's probably going to take them a year before this looks something coherent enough to win a title.
Yeah, I agree with that 1,000%. I think Philadelphia is a much different situation. I don't hate the move, but I just think that the move gets way more credit than it deserves to get at this point. And I love the way you said microwave, because when you start thinking about what we saw from Boston, what was it, 107 games the tandem played together, and everybody said, split it up. And Boston was very patient through that process. But you look at the Bucks, and ever since the Bucks have won a championship, all they've done is over tinker. Like there's this fine line between trying to figure out how to make your roster the best it can be right now, but then also just trying to identify how do you have enough depth to do it at the same time, and do you have the right scoring all the way across the board? I think Paul George will take some of the emphasis off Embiid, and I love that Embiid is even saying maybe I can stay healthy now. I like that, but does this move suddenly make them better than Boston? And that's a real line. So you're putting all this emphasis in a brand that makes you better, but it doesn't make you better than Boston. So it's difficult for me because every team should be trying to get better. I can't find the path from a mercenary sort of, we're going to bring this guy in for 2 years, bring this guy in for 2 years. I don't think anybody has the patience to let it cook. So this just feels to me like one of those things in 2 or 3 years that'll get blown up again.
Well, I think for Philadelphia, I think in the context of their situation, though, you can't really have patience for the Joel Embiid-sized reason that you mentioned. And this Paul George move was the best move on the board. Like, is there something else you would have rather them done? Because I don't think bringing Jimmy Butler over, even though they're both similarly aged players based on style of play and the way Jimmy Butler currently operates, which is the regular season is there, it's certainly a thing, but I'm here to play valuable postseason basketball. You can create an argument where that works for the 76ers team, but I still think having a guy that can be available to you more, and Paul George more available this last year for the Clippers than he had been during his tenure there in the 5 years so far. And so you're counting on that carrying over in a way that maybe isn't as replicable as it used to be, but it still looks like, in most people's estimations, the best move that they had on the board. And you're right, I don't think there was a magic better than Boston bullet out there for Philadelphia, but this is as close as they were going to get.
Yeah, and you're right. Sometimes, like this is what we said in the draft, right? Sometimes you're just screwed. As a team, as an organization, what you have, what you need just isn't going to be there for you, right? And this feels like, yeah, it's a move that helps in that situation. But to your point, I don't think that there was a great, hey, this fixes everything. And when you don't have that, what do you do? And I don't know the answer to that. Like, again, going back to the NFL draft, my beloved Raiders needed a quarterback. Well, okay, cool. People in hell want ice water too. Like sometimes the way the board falls just isn't going to be your way. And that's the way I look at some of these franchises. But Mike, think about the last couple of champions we've seen, and they were all on the cusp. Like we knew Boston just had to figure out how to break through. We knew Denver was developing and they were right there. We all knew that was happening. We knew the Bucks were right there. They just had to figure out a way to make some better adjustments in the playoffs. Those were all logical, tiny steps that were needed to take a team from being almost there to winning a chip. I don't think there are a lot of teams in the NBA right now that are almost there. Like the reliance right now for Philly is, man, you better hope that somebody in Boston either implodes or gets injured or they have a terrible year. Like that's your only shot. So you got to give yourself the best shot, but that doesn't feel good.
No, I think the Eastern Conference is interesting to consider that, because I do think the Milwaukee team you've mentioned a couple of times could be better next year. I think a lot more of what went on with them was injury and that inability to properly integrate Damian Lillard right away when you didn't have Chris Middleton available to you all that time. I think the New York Knicks are a fascinating team where how long, and we always look at the ticking time bomb that seems to be Tom Thibodeau with players' bodies, as he got the perfect weapon for him in Mikal Bridges. But Fitz, to your point about teams that are ready, it's why as we've gone along this offseason, and we've talked about, and this is usually the case for the draft, the best teams aren't reliant on that or aren't reliant on just free agency to make that move to the next level. Oklahoma City Thunder, looking like my early pick to win it all next year. That's a team built up that core the right way, made a couple of prudent moves as they headed into this offseason, has the core already on the roster that got a bunch of valuable experience last year and seems to be walking right up to that same edge that we saw Denver walk up to, that we saw Milwaukee walk up to, and that we saw the Boston Celtics finally step over the line for next year. So hopefully we'll have plenty more news to talk about in the NBA that's always giving in this time of year. Looking ahead, All of it, because honestly, we're just playing for NFL training camp at this point, so we need more NBA players to podcast. Draymond Green, where you been, man? We need some Draymond Green reaction to this Klay Thompson sound. Help us out. In the meantime, though, coming up next, we got some big-time statements coming out of Team USA basketball camp. The real question is Anthony Edwards right about being the best player on the roster? Next on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic, and God bless America, okay? Team USA basketball opening up with a showcase in Las Vegas tonight versus Canada. Going to be amazing as we beat our brothers to the north. Obviously, tons of star power on this team, you guys. When you look at this roster, really exciting. And in his first Team USA camp, Anthony Edwards is not lacking confidence, okay? We know that for sure. He was asked how he fits into this roster, and he had this to say.
I'm still the number one option. Yeah. I mean, y'all might look at it differently. I don't look at it no differently. Yeah, I just go out there and be myself, shoot my shots, play defense, and, you know, they got to fit in and play around me. That's how I feel. Yeah.
Say it with your chest. Jeez. Okay.
Well, I mean, it's a great camera shot of him with the hat that says "Danger, no filter" on the back as he's saying this. The product placement is off the charts.
Okay, he says he's the number one option, guys. So what are your thoughts on that statement? And then who would be your starting five? Steve Kerr was like, yeah, I love this from him, man. Like, love the confidence.
I mean, Mike, don't you think at some point he has to say, like, let's just start with the very basic here. You're Anthony Edwards. Like, you've gotten to this point in your career. You've gotten to this point in the NBA. There's no way you're sitting in front of reporters and being like, man, you know, I'm just happy to be here. Like, that's just not how a guy like that is wired. So I just at least, Mike, have to start with the very basic of what the hell else was he going to say? I expect and want that sort of confidence from somebody that we're trying to anoint. Like, remember, there was a period a few months ago where people were trying to make him Jordan right now, as asinine as that feels, right? So I just got to look at this and say, what else was he going to say, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, listen, a day after we're getting cooked in Instagram comments for hyping up Cooper Flagg coming off a scrimmage bit of footage that made it to the internet, anointing Anthony Edwards after a whole basketball season of looking like that dude at 22 years old. Yeah, I'm not surprised by this, quite honestly. Anthony Edwards is a very smart dude. I think we saw that on display for him as a teammate. Like, there's a tremendous amount of emotional intelligence from a guy that was an incredible leader for that team that we saw propping up his teammate Karl Anthony Towns at multiple junctures. And so him saying this with a smirk on his face kind of feels like he knows he's playing the part a little bit too right now. That being said, when you look at this roster fits, and I've seen all of the comparisons of people asking who's favored between this roster and the Dream Team, and it's got all these names, like, it's got a great group of names on this roster that are all on the back nine of their career, right? LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, even Joel Embiid and company. They're all star players that at this point we can say they're past the best that they're going to be. I think even for Joel Embiid at this pace, peaking in the year before and the year of his MVP, I don't know if we're going to, because of injury, get that same quality of guy. And so Anthony Edwards is one of the guys on this roster, along with Jason Tatum, that's ascending more towards his peak than everybody else. So it's not insane to think of, even if I don't think it's true that he's the absolute best player on that team right now.
So two things can be true at once here, right? Like, they are on the back nine, and I believe that all of the names that you mentioned on the back nine would still whip the snot out of the rest of the world in any of these competitions. So, like, none of us are questioning the greatness of any of the players you just mentioned. However, as much as Anthony Edwards says what he says, if I'm Jason Tatum and I'm in the same locker room, I just look over and I'm like, I think I might have a case here. Like, there is some element of, like, whatever the questions were on Jason Tatum, he used them like toilet paper through the NBA championship. Like, let's just be honest. He is absolutely established, right? Like, there's no way that Tatum's going to be okay with that.
I mean, the finals MVP? Well, I mean, what happened there? Like, he wasn't even technically the MVP of the finals on his own roster. So I don't know. Like, yes, he is the current NBA champion. And yes, like, in all seriousness, Jason Tatum, the basketball player, is incredible and is capable of a lot. But Anthony Edwards seems like the exact kind of style of play and personality that Jason Tatum would love to take a backseat to in critical moments.
Look, I don't think you're wrong about part of that, but I'll go back to the personality aspect. We're back to karaoke, right? Like, Anthony Edwards is coming out and, like, he's just showing on the karaoke stage, and he's an entertainer, and we love watching it. So now this is something I genuinely believe. I'm not just saying this to troll, Mike. I genuinely believe that personality wins benefit of the doubt. And once we fall in love with certain personalities, we establish so much benefit of the doubt to their greatness, to what they have accomplished, to what they need to accomplish. Anthony Edwards is in that ascending portion where we're like, man, look what he's doing. And it's Minnesota where he's doing it. And he's lovable. And he has all the right clips. And, like, he sounds great doing it. And it's fun to watch. And so we anoint that. While on the other side, for months until a championship was won, we were like, I don't know. Tatum hasn't been clutch. You know what's better than not being clutch? Actually, or worse than being clutch is never getting to the clutch moment. Like, we just ascend Anthony Edwards to this moment because we love his personality, whereas Tatum has been doing it year in and year out, over and over.
Yeah, I mean, Jason Tatum's a great player. Jason Tatum is an incredible skill set. He is so many things in the basketball court, offensively and defensively, that you would love to have in your team. I'm just saying, when you get a bunch of guys, you've talked about personality a ton. I do think that some of those leadership intangibles matter when you're trying to get a group together like this that comparatively doesn't spend as much time together. And when you're trying to figure out in pivotal moments, who and what are we going to rely on for this? And to not have to ask that question when Anthony Edwards is on the floor, even if maybe you'd like to, does solve some problems. Like, Jason Tatum is a guy that, we've talked ad nauseum about the clutch time numbers for him and what happens in pivotal situation. That's a guy who I'm sure would rather Anthony Edwards have the rock in his fan. We've talked about for years LeBron James wanting to look for someone on his team as an outlet to take the baton from as he starts to get up there in age, and Anthony Davis just not really being up up to the task in the ways that we had hoped for. Steph Curry later in his career, all the, like on and on down the list with these guys that I think a personality type like Anthony Edwards is always valuable, especially in a room like this. He's going to have to go out and prove it. We remember hearing all those stories from the Dream Team about Jordan and these guys and the one-on-one games and stuff like that. And these guys are all hyper competitors. I'm just saying Anthony Edwards, even if he's not the best player, believes he is. And that's just as important as anything else when you get a group together like this.
Yeah, but don't you think AD believes he's the best player? And don't you think, I mean, at some level, even Tyrese Halliburton's trying to justify to the world that he's the best player. Like all of these guys said with Jess.
Sure.
All of these. Okay, yeah. But I'm just saying when Anthony Edwards comes in, because to your point, man, if they want somebody to have the rock in their hands and be the leader and take over, you think KD and Steph and LeBron are looking at Anthony Edwards and be like, yeah, man, it's all you. We follow you, good sir. Like, that seems like too much of a leap from what we've seen. As much as I think Anthony's great, it's too much of a leap to suddenly get to everybody's going to fall into the follower line behind Anthony Edwards.
It will be interesting, and I think that's really the only bit of fascination I have with Team USA. Because like you said, going up against the rest of the world right now, I feel pretty good about this. I think when they get started in group play, they announced those the other day, they start off with Serbia. So you're going to get Jokic right out of the gate. And I know Joel Embiid's downplayed that matchup, but everyone's excited to see that. I think I am interested to see who does step up. Like Anthony Edwards going into this and coming out after the season he had as the story of Team USA basketball would be incredible for everyone. Because they are, I think, going to pummel most of these teams given the quality of the roster, given how much after. And listen, I know Anthony Edwards was on that FIBA roster that didn't do so well and is the reason that they all decided to re-up for this because LeBron and company got on the horn and said, we're not about to get embarrassed in Paris when we go over here for the Olympics. But I still do, I don't know, I'll be curious because I think a lot of the rest of these guys have been through this enough to go, all right, yeah, if there's moments where I can let my foot off the gas as an older guy and hand the ball to a young, eager dude, that might be something that everyone's amenable to.
Maybe, but what blows my mind is if AD goes out there and has the best Olympics we've ever seen in history, nobody's going to talk differently about AD in the fall. If Tatum goes out, nobody's going to talk about Tatum differently in the fall. If Drew Holiday goes out and has Michael Jordan like, oh my God, dominates the world, nobody's going to talk about it. If Anthony Edwards goes out and does it, all of a sudden it's only going to continue to build on this legacy
because
of
he's
the player
22.
that we are anointing. Yeah, but still,
it's
because
he's 22. He's got all this room in front of him right now, Jason, that we can get excited. All the rest of those guys you mentioned in some way, shape, or form, we feel like are fully formed players based on their age, based on the level of accomplishment and tenure they've already had around the league. Anthony Edwards is 35. The one that
Tatum's not 35 out here. Like, come on. Like, Tatum's still a spring chicken.
Listen, Tatum, you could argue, is entering the prime of his basketball career. We will wait and see. But Anthony Edwards has time and room and has given us enough already to get excited about. Coming up next, though, let's go back to even further in the youth movement here. Mike Gundy rocking Big 12 Media Day with some suspect comments next. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We will get to some comments from Oklahoma State head football coach Mike Gundy on the arrest of their star running back. All-American Ollie Gordon II was arrested for suspicion of DUI recently and attended Big 12 Media Day with his head coach. And against all odds, the player who was actually arrested was not the one that made the comments that we're all going to be talking about today, even given the layout that I just mentioned there. But during the break, we were having a conversation. Team USA basketball turned into Who from Team USA basketball. Got invited to the Michael Rubin-led white party that we see the footage of every year. And it got me thinking, because, Jason, you made the comment about, if you and I we're never getting invited to that party. Looking at the tax bracket, looking at the star power of the people at that party. Shout out to our former teammate Ryan Clark out there and doing it in the short sleeve suit outfit that he had on. He fit in perfectly there. I would be terrified, even if somehow I make-a-wished my way into an invite to that party. There's no way I'd ever feel comfortable enough to have fun sitting there as my fat ass wearing all white at a party that I can't imagine has condiments available or anything there, given the risk reward of that with those outfits.
I was walking out of a studio years ago and I was wearing a white shirt and I was going somewhere. And one of the guys looked at me and they're like, man, you're going to wear a white shirt out? Because they know me. And I was like, and I remember so distinctly, I was holding my coffee cup in front of me. And I was like, I'm a grown ass man. I will be just fine. And as I said that, the screen door that was outside just lightly tapped my back. And all of a sudden coffee went everywhere. I was not meant to ever wear white. I am a child. I can't do it. So I'd have to scotch card it. I'd have to have a secret second outfit hidden somewhere in the bushes. Maybe I could change it into.
I'd imagine they've got to have that available, right? As they walk around with hors d'oeuvres and drinks and stuff like that, there's got to be tied to go pens, right, Jesse?
Have you guys ever been to a party?
Yes.
Well, yeah.
Okay. I was just checking.
One of this caliber.
I was just checking because it sounds like you think that this is some Illuminati thing and they've got Scotch Guard and Tide pens just at the ready.
That is 100% what I think.
You can ask me to wear white. You better
You have a couple drinks and then nobody cares if there's a little schmutz on your shirt. You know what I mean?
There's no chance you could be the one with the stain. I'm sure if you get a stain on your outfit, they're looking at the guest list for next year and already putting a question mark next to your name.
No,
look.
We did discuss this, that apparently you're rated on your performance. They go through the guest list and people are cut based on party performance. So that's a lot of pressure.
There are two things here. One, any party I have not frequented parties in the Hamptons, but if you ever go to a party in the Hamptons, there are a lot of those servers have a little Tide pen. They'll help you out with stuff. Two, and this is important. I think the first thing they're going to do is bring a massive barbecue meatball to Mike and I, and they're going to be eat this. And if you get any on you, you're out. That's it. That's the way it goes.
I like how this is what the barometer is, you think, for party performance. Did you spill on yourself? And they're going to be all right, get out. You spilled. Leave. What?
That's the first lesson. That's the first level before you get to interesting. What does he potentially do? I can imagine there's a dance floor there, something where there's music on. Maybe some people cut it up at some point. Maybe we need to get Ryan Clark on here and have him give us some inside info on what's going on at the white party. This seems like the proper reporting.
I do want to ask you one question though, Mike. As we were discussing, I heard, and I haven't confirmed this, but I heard that the invites were these art pieces that were $50,000 each. What if instead of going to the party, you and I become the ticket takers at the front of the party? We don't really have to be the ticket takers. We just set up somewhere outside. We accept people's invitations thinking they're going to bring the art back to show that they got the invite. I don't know if that's how it works.
No.
And then we steal the art. That doesn't work?
No, that's not. You don't have to bring the giant piece of art that you were given.
I didn't know if
walking up with this giant all right, here we go. Showing up to the white party. Let me just take this out of my car. No, you get to keep it. That's the whole point.
Well, I didn't think that. Then how do they know you're on the list? I don't know. Look, this is why
on the list.
You know what? She can drive us to the party and tell me how to act right before we go in. She's going to have to give me a reminder. Mike, you are marginally famous in some very small circles. You should be able to work this out. Or RC, just tell RC, if he wants a +1, I'll go, I'll carry his bag, I'll make just to get in.
I can't imagine two people that Ryan Clark would want to bring to this party less than us.
I also don't think you don't just get a +1 either.
Well, I mean, you think they're telling Brady he can't bring whoever he wants to bring? Like,
I'm
they're going to
sure
trust
if
Brady
said, "Hey, can I have a +1?" They'd give Tom Brady a +1. But they'd have. It's not just like, "Oh, this is my +1."
You are very definitive on a party that you can't be definitive. You haven't been invited. You don't know.
I have not been invited. That's 100% correct. Have not been invited.
Mike, we could throw our own white party, like a much more
competing white party.
Yeah, like a white party for common folk. Like a white party for marginally successful people.
A white party where everyone is encouraged to get stains on their shirt. Like a white party that's just a backyard barbecue where people look really messy. Is that what you're essentially envisioning for us?
It's going to be the beige party. It's not quite the white party, but it's kind of close.
You don't tell anybody, and then the minute they walk in, you just start flinging food at them to see how much you can get on them, and then all of a sudden the party's underway. Now we're having a good time.
Yeah.
This basically just sounds like we've reverse engineered a Buffalo Bills tailgate where it's a bunch of white people covered in condiments.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Mike, or any family gathering at your house, because there's no way that there's just no way the condiments aren't being worn by the Golics.
Yeah, no, again, we're all an unholy mess. This has spiraled so far out of control. We're going to get to Mike Gundy and Oklahoma State in the next segment because there's no way we're going to do justice to a man alluding to 1,000 DUIs in the 3 minutes that we've got left in this segment here. Go ahead, Jason,
then I'll
you
tell
had
you,
something for that?
I got to tell no. I just got to tell you, since we were talking about condiments and you're not changing the subject now, I will tell you, you'll be very proud of me. On the 4th of July, I had a hot dog. Like, I haven't had anything but the same 5 meals all day, every day since May 15th, and nothing but water to drink. I had a hot dog and an iced coffee on the 4th of July. And I took one bite of what I'm sure was a very generic plain hot dog. That thing tasted like the best thing I've ever had in my life. Like, it was amazing. I savored every bite of it. Like, the ketchup and the mustard, I'm telling you, hot dogs are underrated as a food. It's just now that I haven't had one in a while.
So, Fitz, I've been out on maternity leave. I'm sorry, you just said you've had the same how many meals since May?
I eat 5 meals a day, the same 5 meals at the same time, all day, every day. I'm trying to get abs, all right? So I'm trying to get abs to have abs to have abs. I lost 3 inches on my waist in the month of June. I'm telling you, I'm on a quest right now. I got 2 abs. I'm trying to get a 3rd one to move in. Like, I'm trying to do the whole thing. And then I'm never going to wear a shirt.
Is this in preparation to join the dating apps?
It's just, I'm just going to be out in these streets like that. No, this is like my midlife crisis. My midlife crisis is telling me, as long as I've known Mike, I've been trying to get abs. So I finally did the thing. I finally got a trainer and did all the blood work and did all that. Like, I've turned my life around, man. I haven't had any alcohol since May. Look, edibles are still my friend, but they're allowed, and I can't snack when I have them. So, they're allowed and I can't snack. So I have the same 5 meals and water all day, every day. That's my life.
That sounds
You're getting
very
high
sad.
and not snacking?
Yeah, at first.
That sounds hellish.
The first week of that, I was like, I don't think I can do this. And then I had to make a conscious decision. I either have the choice of not snacking or not getting high. And we know what's going to win there, Mike. So, I have learned, like, what I do is I get a bunch, like a massive number of like Soda Stream bottles, and I fill each of them with a different flavor of water. And then I just chug water all night long. So, like, it is amazing. I'm drinking over a gallon of water after 7 p.m. until I fall asleep. Like,
what's your therapist number? I think we need to get them on the horn.
My therapist has been a part of this too. Thank you very much. I'm telling you what, I've turned my life. I'm a beacon of fitness. I'm a beacon of light in a dark, dark world. All from a hot dog, though.
And you can't have coffee, did you say?
Yeah, no, I get 1 iced coffee a week now. That's my 1 iced coffee, or 1 plain black iced coffee, or plain iced green tea a week. Eventually, I'll get to the point where I can have 1 a day. But, I'm on a mission from God right now.
It just kind of sounds like, what's the point of being alive? But, to each their own.
When I have abs, when I stop wearing a t-shirt at all, like, I'm just going to come on this, in a couple of months, I'll be on this show. I won't be wearing a shirt at all. That's the point.
Okay. Yep.
This is the Jason
Go
Fitz
to the
who
white
at the gym
party
the
and
other
rip my
day got a
shirt off.
comment from a small man at the gym going, scrawny guys like us in the midst of all his gains, to immediately humble him before the altar of fitness after everything that you just heard. We'll talk sports again after this. Let's go, Joe and Golic. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Coming up in about 10 minutes here, one of Fitz's teammates over at Yahoo Sports, Vincent Goodwill, NBA writer, going to join us to talk about this Team USA roster. Maybe he can answer for us the question of who is actually the best player on the Team USA men's basketball roster. At GoJo and Golic on Twitter, we'd love to hear from you there as well. We can talk about that. Cooper Flagg, he sat down with Anthony Edwards as well. So plenty of great stuff that we can get into with him off the top of the next hour here. But Jason, as we mentioned at the start of last segment, we've got media days going on right now for the various college football conferences. You and I have obviously cut so much of our teeth covering that sport and being around college football. And what we saw, I got to admit, was a first for me at these media days. Big 12 Media Day featured the Oklahoma State Cowboys that are going to be one of the favorites to win the conference this year. They were a team last year that found gold in running back Ollie Gordon, who ended up as a consensus All-American, was, I believe, 7th in the Heisman voting at the end of a prolific season that included over 1,700 yards, 21 rushing touchdowns, and a lot of really compelling plays from him that unfortunately gave way this offseason to an arrest. He was arrested for DUI recently this offseason. He issued a formal apology on Monday and Tuesday of this week, said he couldn't elaborate on what went on because of legal reasons here, but Mike Gundy and company from Oklahoma State elected to bring him to Big 12 Media Days. And Mike Gundy said it's because college football is different now. You're basically paid employees, and said the punishment was going to be him having to come and face the music there. In the midst of all that, Mike Gundy also got to talking. And keep in mind, this is Mike Gundy knowing he is bringing a player who just got a DUI, who is one of the leaders on their team, to Media Day. This is Mike Gundy coming in knowing he is going to have to talk about this. He has put the bullseye, the bullseye is on their back for this. And this is what Mike Gundy had to say, elaborating on the DUI arrest of his star player. Take a listen.
So I looked it up on my phone. What would be the legal limit? Like in Oklahoma is .08, and Ollie was .1. So I looked it up, and it was based on body weight. Not to get into the legal side of it, but I thought really 2 or 3 beers or 4. I'm not justifying what Ollie did. I'm telling you what decision I made. Well, I thought I've probably done that 1,000 times in my life. And I, it's just fine. So I got lucky. People get lucky.
And Mike Gundy later clarified on Twitter, tweeting, quote, "My intended point today at Big 12 Media Days was that we are all guilty of making bad decisions. It was not a reference to something specific." So, Jason, when you hear this from the leader of the team, who also said, by the way, that Ollie Gordon was not going to be punished by missing time for Oklahoma State this fall. He said, "I'm going to do what's best for the player, what's best for Oklahoma State football," and joked that the only punishment might be he may carry the ball 50 times in their first game against South Dakota State. So how'd you feel about this, Jason?
Not only did he know that the player was going to come out with the bullseye on his back, he knew he was going to have to speak on it. And one of the reasons I hold coaches to such a high standard is, frankly, they are amongst the highest paid educators in the state. At the end of the day, I know that they're football coaches, but they represent the university, and they ask the kids to represent the university in everything they do. So to me, a coach has to know when he's coming into these media days that by putting that bullseye on, the coach himself is going to have to be prepared to answer. So that was the best prepared answer that he could give us in that situation. It makes no sense. And if his point didn't come across well, then my question is, why didn't you better understand the point you were trying to make coming into the moment? Like, this wasn't a surprise gotcha question that hit from out of nowhere. This is something he saw coming, and that was the best answer he could give. And frankly, if it is an employee relationship at this point, the message you're sending to every one of your employees on that roster is, hey, if you're going to get a DUI, no worries. There won't be a punishment. We're just going to make you face the press for it. That to me doesn't seem to have any standard that a school would be comfortable upholding.
Also, I just want to say there was a little bit of like, oh, based on his body weight, it was like this number of beers and like whatever. He allegedly had empty bottles of vodka and tequila in the vehicle when he was arrested. So literally in the car with him. These are all facts that Gundy is aware of, right? Like you said, Fitz, it does kind of boggle the mind that knowing everything he knew, he went out and said this. It's like, is the media training in the room with us? It's not. It's not present at all. So
Ollie Gordon, by the way, also 20 years old, so underage in this as well. But that I don't know, that part to me, and this is maybe a reflection on society that pales in comparison to getting behind the wheel of a car drunk. And I think that should be the massive differentiator here. Like, listen, I had an arrest in college for minor intoxication. We have talked about it plenty on the show over the years. We've made fun of my mugshot, all those things that have come up, because that was not a position where I was in a position to hurt somebody else with my actions there, blowing a .03 as an 18-year-old in college and getting arrested. And God love my head coach at the time, Charlie Weiss, said, listen, you weren't guilty of doing, and it was a similar sentiment of you weren't guilty of doing something that everybody else wasn't doing. You just got caught. And so we've got to punish you accordingly. And I had a bunch of early morning workouts there. I wasn't suspended or anything. But again, the severity jumps up when you're behind the wheel of a 2-ton killing machine the way that you are in these instances. And to Fitz's point about being the leader of that organization, that's not something that you can come out and send the message that you're so laissez-faire about, even if that's the way you actually view it. That's the burden of leadership in these spots.
Is there not also a point of the message you're sending is like, well, it was close. And like, look, we see the billboards all the time. Buzz driving is drunk driving. And
sure.
we live in a society now where you can literally buy a little breathalyzer and you can breathalyze yourself before you drive to make sure that you're okay. We also live in an Uber society. Every one of these college kids has somebody they can call that will come and pick them up. Like, the number of bad decisions that go into this, the message shouldn't be, well, he was barely over. The message should be, what the hell were you doing driving if you thought you were even close? Like that, right. That's the wrong, to me, you shouldn't be telling your kids, well, just get as close to .08 as you possibly can. Like that's a wildly irresponsible message from a coach.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things like, man, if Mike Gundy's trying to, wax poetic about back in the day and what it was like and how all that stuff falls away because that ain't what it's like now. You mentioned you have a million options. You are now paid employees. You've got money to be able to afford somebody else, even if that shouldn't be a limiting factor in this day and age. There are any number of reasons. When this first got started, and I heard from Mike Gundy that Ollie Gordon wasn't going to be punished by missing time, and one part of Mike Gundy's sentiment was, I'm going to do what's best for our football team. I'm not going to lie, part of me appreciated the honesty there. Like, he didn't get up and try. It was just, hey, man, listen, we win football games when Ollie Gordon's on the field. I want that dude on the field, and I'm going to treat you all fair, but fair ain't the same. The old, I think it was a Parcells line there. Because we understand, to your point, Jason, if this is the third linebacker the sixth linebacker on the roster, or a walk-on player, or someone comparatively less important, I'm sure the punishment's going to look different, because we all understand to some point in locker rooms how the game goes, that we're not all as important to the team as the next guy next to us based on what goes on there. So I'm not going to lie, part of me was sort of refreshed by the honesty. He's like, hey, man, we win games when he's out there, but the rest of this has obviously been a bridge too far.
Well, and think back, when I first moved to Connecticut and was first with ESPN, it was funny because some people laughed at the fact that I Ubered everywhere. And I do. I Uber anytime I'm consuming anything, I Ubered everywhere. And people are like, why are you Ubering? You're only going to have a couple of drinks. And my answer was like, man, it's too easy for me to get fired. Like, there are certain people at this company whose name can make it in the paper. They're going to be fine. I am not one of those people, right? So for me, I think it takes a basic understanding. And that should be part of the lesson here. that, frankly, the entire coaching staff is trying to show every one of the kids. It takes very little to be responsible in this situation, and one mistake can ruin lives and ruin your life. I mean, we've seen it recently, and the impact it's had, obviously, with Kyrie Jackson, and the tragedy that multiple kids have gone through, having their lives taken by a drunk driver. I would think if you're a kid currently, you still remember Henry Ruggs waking up and not even realizing he killed somebody behind the wheel. Like, there are too many recent examples for kids to be doing this. The message should be just avoid the thing entirely.
The irony that Mike Gundy brought Ollie Gordon to Big 12 Media Day to teach some sort of lesson, and then ended up being the one to teach him that lesson about how not to respond to this situation is so college football, it actually hurts a little bit. We're going to take a quick break, and coming up next in hour number 2, Vincent Goodwill from Yahoo Sports going to join us to look ahead to Team USA men's basketball and their upcoming stretch heading to the Paris Olympics. Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Jesse Cofield, Jason Fitz here for hour number 2 of the show. Again, Vincent Goodwill from Yahoo Sports, hopefully going to join us here to talk some USA basketball. But in the meantime, Fitz, we haven't mentioned it much today, and I'd be curious for your opinion. Dad and I sort of poo-pooed the idea as we roll into 2024 waiting for football season. And we know in this country we are almost criminally addicted to this sport and what it brings us. We're close to training camps. And even with that in mind, we wouldn't really take the bait on this offseason Hard Knocks. We've now got 3 different versions. We've got the normal Hard Knocks, the offseason Hard Knocks with the New York Giants, the in-season Hard Knocks that was announced for the entire AFC North this year that we've seen in the past. Couldn't get in on it. So base level, are you watching any of them besides? Are you even watching the normal Hard Knocks anymore at this point, Fitz?
No. Like, Hard Knocks became soft knocks to me when they covered the Raiders the year that Antonio Brown absolutely lost it. And to me, knowing that was such a cultural phenomenon of a story that TMZ was covering it every day, but Hard Knocks was there with cameras and showed us nothing showed us everything about the edit rights and the fact that teams in the league will make sure that only what they want to get out gets out. So to me, shame on the NFL, shame on HBO, shame on everybody for being involved in it. It became soft knocks at that point. I take very little credence from it ever since then, because no matter what, it is absolutely the worst of the worst when it comes to how it's been edited.
Okay, but question, in this offseason edition, with the Giants, we did see what was kind of a bad look for them with the Saquon thing going on. They're like, surely nobody's going to pay this guy. And then obviously he got paid. So they didn't probably get too much of a say in that edit, did they?
So this is interesting. So we've got the clip right here. Hold on. We have the clip that Jesse is referencing here. Why don't we play this? So again, episode 2 aired last night. And in episode 1, we got some of the behind the scenes look at the Giants. So this is the whole offseason through the draft leading up in the offseason. And one of the major topics was obviously the prospect of paying Saquon Barkley. And this was the clip that started going viral of that conversation involving Joe Schoen and others in that front office.
Are we positive that nobody's going to pay him that kind of money? Like, there's nobody in the draft. There's no free agents, receivers they're either going to be going back to their team at $20 million.
I mean, who would you say would go sign up running back to that dollar amount?
A team anyone that has money to spend.
There's a lot of running backs in free agency.
Yeah, but are any potential difference makers really? Like after you watch this film?
Even if Saquon's number 1 on your board, do you imagine anyone's going to have such a gap between Saquon and Jacobs, Pollard, Henry, whoever else, that they're going to want him at $12 million a year or minus whatever we're willing to eat and send a draft pick?
The answer to that question turned out to be yes, and a team inside your division, Jason.
So I was on Fox Sports Radio on Sunday, hanging out with Kerry Rhodes, all-pro safety in the NFL. And I asked this very question, why would this get out? And without hesitation, Kerry said, because the Giants had their feelings hurt by some of the things Saquon said walking out the door, and the Giants wanted to make sure that the world understood that they didn't think he had that value, that the Eagles made a mistake. They're standing tall for their organization, basically blowing back to the grief they got from Saquon by saying, hey, and when you think about it, that makes sense. Like there is some level here of the Giants are basically comfortable with that being out because they don't think he was worth it. They don't think he is a difference maker above the level compared to the rest of them. So with that being said, I think they're comfortable letting it get out because they think that ultimately time will show that they were right in the decision.
Yeah, like every other time an NFL front office member, coach steps to the microphone, it is for a prepared statement, is with the understanding that that message is going to reach someone. And Jason, I think you're right. I think Hard Knocks has now been seen as that way. While so many teams look at that as an inconvenience, while so many teams are bothered by the presence there, once they're in the building, the best you can do is take advantage of the opportunity to get the message out there that you want to get to your fan base, maybe to your players, or to maybe a player that's walked out the door. We'll have plenty more time to get to the rest of that here. But now, as we get ready to turn the page to the Olympics coming up, we know this Team USA men's basketball team is getting ready to hopefully go out there and throttle a whole bunch of the rest of the world. For more on that, Vincent Goodwill, kind enough to join us now, NBA writer over at Yahoo Sports, one of our buddy Jason Fitz' teammates over there. Good morning, Vince. How you doing?
Hey, good morning, guys. How you guys doing?
Vinny, what's going on, brother?
What's up, Fitz?
A lot of Mike, you could at least give us a yodel once, like the Yahoo, come and do the whole thing. I mean, if you want.
What? You just didn't. You've got a way better voice than me anyway. I don't want to sully the good folks at Yahoo's reputation with my bad
That's
yodeling.
Fair. That's fair.
That is fair. And yodeling is not what we brought Vinny Goodwill here to do. And so instead, we will actually talk about some basketball. So I'm curious. We were having the conversation. Anthony Edwards made the statement the other day that he's the main option on this team, that everyone else is going to adjust to him. I know you had a chance to sit down with Anthony Edwards a little bit here. How much of that does he believe? Is he actually the best player on this USA basketball roster at this current juncture?
I don't know if that really matters. And when I talked to him later on that day or maybe the next day, he really wasn't having that bravado. He was more so deferential to Kevin Durant and deferential to Stephen Curry. He was just saying, hey, I'll do whatever needs to be done. I think in that setting, he was saying what he knew was going to catch some eyeballs. Do I believe that he can be the number one option, that he thinks he can be the number one option? Absolutely. Do you see the confidence he carries himself with? I do think there's an element of, hey, I'm the young guy here. It's time for me to take the mantle from these old dudes. There's going to be a moment. There's going to be some critical game or some juncture where someone is going to have to step forward and be the alpha dog. Usually that's LeBron James. Usually that's KD. Usually that's Steph. What happens if it actually is a guy like Anthony Edwards and they actually need him to do it? That could be something really fascinating to observe.
All right, Vinny, you mentioned some of the old guys. You went viral the other day, your interview with KD. Everybody's talking about it. He made it clear he hates the fact that people buy into the lies. How does KD want us to cover KD?
That's an interesting thing. I don't know if he knows that. I think KD is a basketball purist. That's the one thing I do know. He loves the game. Now, do I think that he loves the gossip around other parts of the game? Yeah, as long as it's not around him. You know what I mean? I think we can all look at it and say, man, we love the gossip until that lens panels his way to us. And I think that's human nature. And I think for KD on draft night, for him to be, in his words, talking to owners and executives and coaches, and then to hear and see his name saying, oh, Phoenix wants to get out of KD, he thinks, well, somebody's got to be lying here. And it's not the people that's talking to me right in front of my face. So I just think he is frustrated and probably a little fatigued from the whole KD engagement farming business. I think that's just how he looks at it. And partially it is, he spends way too much time online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we've all figured out at some point in our lives here that the more time you pour into that place, the more chance it has to make you feel really not great about something that you enjoy in your life. And for Kevin Durant, it happens to be basketball here. As you've been around this process, these guys and this team, has there been anything that stuck out to you in the lead up for this? I mean, most people, I think on the outside looking in, kind of expect this team to throttle everybody. So what have you gathered from being around this process more up close?
I think it's an interesting thing you said, Mike, because everybody expects them to throttle him. And Steve Kerr tries to pour cold water on that every single day. He made the statement, I think after day one, he was like, look, Chuck Daly and Michael Jordan went golfing for 36 holes on a day of games. Me and Steph and LeBron ain't going to be doing that here. Like, the world is a much better prepared for basketball operation than they were in 1992. And even though some of these teams have players that you may think of as role players in the NBA, inevitably, there are some backup dudes, some Patty Mills, some Carlos Arroyo that turns into Super Mario with the Star. Y'all remember Super Mario with the Star? Where he just throttling everybody? That's what they're preparing for. We don't know who it is, but they feel like it's going to be somebody that emerges when you're playing for your country, and it's a different rule set, and it's a different game. And the other part of it is, have you seen France? Those are some big dudes over there. Victor Wembanyama and Rudy Gobert. There will be no trafficking down the lane on that one. They better get their jump shots in order for that one. So I think while it's likely they will win the gold medal, it is probable they'll win the gold medal. It's not a guarantee. I'm saying they're the betting favorite. I'm saying I would take the U.S. versus the world, so to speak. But I don't think it's as a sure thing as much as we expect just because we see the Avengers on one side.
All right, so one of the guys that's been attacking the Avengers is Cooper Flagg, and I'm trying to figure out what the appropriate reaction is to this. Kid hasn't even played a minute of college basketball. You've seen it, so what are your thoughts?
Well, I think I take my cues from A, what I've seen, and B, what you hear NBA players and NBA personnel saying. And for me, the bar is low, right? Not saying the bar is low where he didn't have to do as much to exceed it, but he's 17 years old. He's not going to be 18 until, I think, December 21st, right? So they didn't expect that much coming from him. They just wanted to see if he belonged. He belonged on day one. It wasn't a whole lot of jitters and nervousness there, right? Day two, it was like, oh, not only do I belong, but I can make an impact. And you saw in the sequences against Anthony Davis and against Bam Adebayo that he can really, let's just erase this term from the lexicon. He ain't sneaky athletic. He real athletic. He ain't white boy athletic. That boy is athletic, okay? He going to be dunking on you. He going to be running past you. He's going to be doing all the things that we expect some of our more melanated brothers to be out here doing. I think Cooper Flagg at 6'8", 6'9", he's going into his body. And the fact that he went out there and he didn't play scared, that's what impressed the NBA coaches. That's what impressed USA Basketball. And that's what earned the respect of the guys that he was going against. He was posting up Drew Holiday for fadeaways. That's one of the 5 best defenders in basketball. What are we doing here?
And you know what? It's a good reminder to everyone to read the scouting report, because as someone that went to Notre Dame, the last thing you want to do is not look up and all of a sudden you're getting yammed on by a Pat Connaughton that you didn't expect to because of the way that he presents outwardly. So it's great advice for everybody here. Vinny, how much does college basketball on the men's side kind of need something like this? I feel like the last couple of seasons that we went through where we saw the women's game blow up with all these star names that we knew really not have that energy matched on the men's side. This feels like for the first time since Zion, we've got a dude we can get this excited about.
I'm going to take it a step further for you, Mike. Basketball needs this, okay? Because did you see the number 1 pick of the NBA draft, Zachary Richichet? I had to learn that name about 5 times fast, like an hour before the draft, because I had no idea who the hell he was, okay? Now, this is going to rankle a little bit of feathers here, but I feel like you guys can rock with me here. Basketball has not had a American-born white player that's come into the college game and then the American game and dominated since Larry Bird. I'm not saying he's Larry Bird. I'm saying the runway is there for him to sort of embrace the hype train. He's going to a legacy school at Duke that's trying to put itself back on the national map after UConn has won all these national titles. If Duke gets back to being the evil empire and they're hated because he's like JJ Redick and Christian Laettner, and then he comes to the game and he takes all of that sort of Americanism with him and the league is better for it, you're talking about college basketball. I'm saying the entire basketball world needs this. You're thinking too small, Golic. You got to think bigger.
Oh, man, that's now I'm even more excited. All right, so talk to me a little bit about Tatum, because we started this show having a little bit of a debate about, best young player, Anthony Edwards or Jason Tatum. But aside from that, we now have NBA champion Jason Tatum. Have you seen a difference in sort of the way he carries himself now that he has that title?
I haven't, because you know what's funny? He wasn't here for the first 2 days for a personal reason. But when he arrived, you can just sort of see it. You can see sort of not only did he got a new haircut, but he's also like the guy that he's like the made man now. And this is no longer the kid Jason Tatum that everybody thinks of when we said he was 19 for like 5 years. Like, he's actually 25. He's actually growing up. And now that he's a champion, there's no conversation that he can't have. There's no room in that hollowed room of, the Kawhis and the LeBrons and the KDs. Like, he's the guy that's in his prime. He's the guy that's not living off of past glory, so to speak, or trying to make sure that he's staying at his peak. He's still ascending. And I think the championship is proof of that. The NBA 2K, cover is proof of that. And all of the things that he's doing, like he and Anthony Edwards are going to have to be guys that have moments here in this, because they are as close to their prime or as close to their peak as anybody. There's only one guy, I think, for USA basketball in this group that hasn't made the conference finals or NBA finals, and that's Joel Embiid. Everybody else has been to the conference finals, have been to the finals, have had their moments, and now Jason Tatum no longer has to be part of that. Hey, man, what you doing here?
Listen, you took it right where I wanted to go next, because Joel Embiid is kind of the one odd man out in terms of that framework in this team. I know he's been talking about and downplaying, hey, the matchup with Nikola Jokic coming up when they see Serbia and all those things. But I'm curious for you how you view him and the point at his career that he's at in light of, hey, they went out and got Paul George this offseason. What they paid for him kind of reeks of, hey, we know we got to take a wild swing because we're dealing with the prime of a player who's been oft injured in his career. So what is the outlook for Joel Embiid from here on out, given what you just mentioned?
I'm not a married man. I've never gotten the "what are we doing here" speech from a significant other, right? You know the speech that every man largely dreads when you've been with a woman for a certain period of time and she's looking at you and she's saying, I'm not wasting my prime here just hanging with you. You better come to the table with something other than kibbles and bits, right? That's where Joel Embiid is right now at the Philadelphia 76ers. Like, it is put up or shut up time for that franchise. The problem is Embiid doesn't have the playoff bona fides to be making demands to the 76ers because he's not always available. Now, granted, he had the Bell's palsy and he was coming off the injury in round one, against the Knicks. So you understood he has a reason. But the problem is, Golic, there's always a reason for the 76ers. There's always a reason for Joel Embiid. It can be Kawhi Leonard taking a shot. It can be Ben Simmons not taking a shot. It can be all these different things. And now he's in a position where they finally put enough pieces around him or a viable co-star in Paul George. But we also know this. I still don't think they're better than the Celtics. I have questions if they're better than the Knicks. I'm not sure what Milwaukee's doing. But we also know that it's not just add water and you get to the finals. It usually takes a year to get your pieces right before you can really get there. The problem is Joel Embiid is already 30 years old. It doesn't seem like it, but he's been in the league for 10 years, and half of the time he's been hurt. Usually you don't get healthier as you get older. Usually you just get old.
But that leads to a philosophical question that we talked about earlier with Paul George. Like, that might have been the best move on the board, but if it doesn't make him best and better than Boston, what's the point? But also, what do you do as an organization if what you need really just isn't there? Like, what else could the Sixers be doing?
Yeah, put it like this. Just because the move might not get them to the finals this year, it doesn't mean that you don't make the move. It means you make the move and you figure out what pieces fit and what pieces work. The problem, I think, with them is they have 3 max salary guys. And I don't know if in this NBA economics structure that you can have 3 max salary guys and put enough pieces around them to compete with the Celtics of the world. Because the Celtics even if the Celtics go 7 deep, which is not necessarily a deep team, their 7 is so much better than everybody else's 7. Philly has 3 top players and then other guys there that you have to ask your questions about. You're saying, wait, we're going to depend on this guy this year. So I think this year will be one of those years where maybe they burst out and get to a hot regular season and they have to figure stuff out in the playoffs, but you have to at least put yourself in that position, because if nothing happened this year, then Joel Embiid starts looking around and saying, hey, if it's not going to happen it's not going to happen for me here right now, maybe I got to get out of here. But you at least have to show, hey, it's not going to be James Harden. It's not going to be Jimmy Butler. We got Paul George. Let's see if we can figure this out. You needed some proof of concept to show Joel that you're at least making an effort.
100%. It seemed like the best move on the board for them at this time, and the human element of it of, hey, we've invested a decade in Joel Embiid here at this franchise. We got to keep showing him that we're serious about this moving forward if we're going to keep him happy enough to want to stick around here. At Vince Goodwill on Twitter is where you can check him out and follow there. Obviously, read him and see him over at Yahoo Sports with our buddy Jason Fitz. Vinny, we appreciate the time, man. Thank you so much. Hopefully we'll talk to you again soon, all right?
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys.
I got to start thinking bigger, Fitz. That's what I took away from all of this. I'm thinking small time around here, hanging out with guys like you. I need to be hanging out with guys like Vinny and thinking bigger.
Wow. Like thinking white party big? Like, is that what we're doing? Like, let me tell you, Cooper's going to get the white party invite any day.
Oh, yeah. No, Cooper Flag definitely seems like after this, that we talked about this the other day, me and Dad, getting the kind of endorsements that he got from current NBA superstars and given the platform of Team USA, couldn't ask for a better springboard into the kind of stardom that Vinny said could change not only college basketball, but absolutely have a big effect going towards the next level and the NBA as well. Speaking of people that were at the white party, coming up next, interesting comments from Joe Burrow heading into an all-important 2024 season for the Bengals. Next. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Jason Fitz, Jesse Cofield. We spent a lot of time getting distracted earlier by the Michael Rubin-led white party that had gone on recently. And so it's about time we get to the substance off of that. Joe Burrow was there wearing a really cool, like, short-sleeve denim outfit that only a guy with that kind of hair and teeth could pull off. And while he was doing that, he was apparently also thinking about the doubters. There is nothing that football players, athletes in general, love more than thinking about their haters and doubters. And Joe Burrow joined the guys on Pardon My Take the other day and was asked if he thought that he had been sort of forgotten about in the general conversation around NFL star quarterbacks. And here's what he had to say.
Do you think people have forgotten about Joe Burrow?
I believe that.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you get hurt, though. You don't play football, people forget about you.
Yeah, which I like the spot you're in right now because I feel like
I love the spot I'm in.
Yeah, like AFC, everyone's like, oh well, you know, Josh, Lamar, and Patrick, CJ Stroud. It's like you're forgetting one guy.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
but again, that's part of the game. If you're not out there and people aren't watching you, then there's nothing to talk about.
Now, Jason, it's not like he came in with some fire and brimstone and necessarily said he was going to be disrespected here, because I do think, like, most and we, Lord knows, spend a ton of time doing lists during the offseason. I'm amazed we haven't heard more disrespected 49ers fans, because every list that I see has Brock Purdy nowhere near even like the top 12 of quarterbacks in the NFL, even after last season. But almost all of them I see after the obvious names like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson, I almost always see Joe Burrow's name right after that in that top tier of quarterbacks. And so do you think there's any truth to the idea that he's been forgotten about even in the year he spent on the shelf?
I think some of the hype around the Bengals has died off. And the reason it feels forgotten about is because it wasn't that long ago that he was the second best quarterback in the NFL to many, right? Like, so the hardest part about Joe Burrow is, what do you do with the injuries? Because I would argue that if the same injuries that occurred to Lamar Jackson repeatedly season after season, we'd sit here and say, oh, injury prone, can't trust him, blah, blah, blah. Like, injury prone is not his fault, but that is his reality. And that's part of what we have to factor in. If Joe Burrow is healthy, I believe the Bengals can win a Super Bowl. If Joe Burrow is healthy, I believe he can be and is the second best quarterback in the NFL. The problem is that's a big old if of late. And I don't remember the last time we just got a full year of Joe Burrow just out there being Joe Burrow. So it's hard. It's not that he's forgotten about to me. It's that people know that as of right now, you're just not sure that you can rely on him to make it through a season. And that has to be part of the context.
No, Vince, I think you're right. Lamar Jackson's the perfect person to have that conversation about, because remember, in the offseason where Lamar Jackson's contract was up for debate, that got brought up ad nauseum, was the amount of games that Lamar Jackson had missed due to injury inside that same division, ignoring the context around them, because Lamar Jackson is a player whose mobility is a much bigger part of the conversation that Joe Burrow at this level. Joe Burrow is still a tremendously mobile quarterback, maybe not nowhere near the same caliber of athlete as Lamar, but you're right. Now having a lower body injury on his resume, missing a season with a knee injury, and then coming off the wrist injury now, it's been something that, given the makeup of that Bengals team, and to their credit, they've gone out and tried to address that now. They've got more weight in the offensive tackle position than I think anyone in NFL history, when you look at Orlando and Trent Brown and now Amarius Mims that they drafted this year out of Georgia. They've gone out of their way to try and do that. But we also know for Joe Burrow, Fitz, it's going to be interesting style of play-wise if this does change some of the risk that he's been willing to take, because going back to his time at LSU, he's been a guy that's been willing to extend plays and buy time to make things happen. And now will he have to curb some of that in the name of making sure he keeps himself upright for a team that desperately needs it?
Well, and the Bengals investing in the offensive line isn't new. They just can't hit. Like, they've tried in the draft. They've tried in free agency. They've tried to address the offensive line. It just hasn't hit the way that any of us expect. So now you have a team that, last year without their starting quarterback, they still put up a good campaign, 9 wins. Like there was still some element of, okay, I feel good about where the Bengals are, right? But moving forward, the expectation was just like this was going to be the 1A to the Chiefs 1 year in and year out. So it feels like if the offensive line can be what they think it is, and T. Higgins on a contract year goes out and balls out the way we all think he's going to ball out, and Joe Burrow stays healthy, man, this is a 13-win football team. That's great. That's just a lot of ifs to apply benefit of the doubt to when those things haven't gone well repeatedly. Like the offensive line, I want to trust, but the fact that every time they draft somebody or sign somebody, it doesn't really work out matters to me, right? Like I want to trust Burrow, but the fact that he hasn't stayed healthy matters to me. I want to trust this defense to be elite, but last year, Mike, it wasn't. Like we love Lou Anarumo, who 2 years ago was going to be a head coach, and now it's like, man, this defense has fallen in every viable metric. So I feel like there's a lot of reasons to question the Bengals, but Burrow's always been a fixer. Everything goes wrong, Burrow finds a way to get it done.
I was going to say, because a lot of the injury stuff we bring up, remember, he started last year with the calf strain in training camp that limited him and got re-aggravated a little bit, but he worked it out. Going back before that, he had the appendix burst that kept him out of training camp. He had missed time in plenty of camps and then always found a way to make it work and play at an extremely high level. He earned that benefit of the doubt and still does, by the way, right? He's fourth in MVP odds on DraftKings Sportsbook behind Mahomes, Allen, and Stroud. The division odds, they're second in division behind the Ravens, who won it last year. The AFC odds, they're second in the AFC behind only the Kansas City Chiefs. And so you look around, they're still plenty respected here. What I want to get to, Jesse, something else that Joe Burrow brought up, though, that garnered a lot of reaction was a conversation about the 18-game schedule.
So he was asked, like, what would your perfect NFL schedule look like? And the first thing he said was, well, how many games are we playing? And then he theorized about that 18-game schedule, like he said. And the way he put it was, you have one bye week the way it is right now in the schedule. Then you have a second bye week that's like a Pro Bowl break. It's everybody's on a bye at that point. So how do we feel about this, guys? Do you think that's the way to do it? And there's already been a little bit of drama about these statements that he made. Chase Daniel saying like the NFLPA is already having conversations about Burrow's comments because people maybe have their feathers a little ruffled because the players don't necessarily want to expand the season to 18 games. So how do we feel about this proposed 18-game situation?
Yeah, well, first off, I thought Chase, and listen, I respect Chase Daniel and his body of work in the NFL. I just don't think that the comments were nearly as inflammatory or advantageous to ownership as all of the other leverage ownership already has. I think most players understand they're walking into this with an arm tied behind their back. And Joe Burrow, you go all the way back to April when a lot of these conversations were leaked out publicly about the NFL's desire for an 18-game schedule from the ownership side. And Joe Burrow immediately tweeted 18 games, 2 bye weeks. Like that is something he was on behalf of players putting out there that's going to need to happen for this thing that might eventually happen to us. So Fitz, I didn't take those as nearly as big a problem for players, and I'm usually pretty sensitive to that stuff.
No, I heard Adam Schefter yesterday say, it's substantial that a high reputation player is speaking on this means that players are talking about it and thinking about it. But also, I think we got to remember sometimes players are human. Like, so if you're Joe Burrow, you're sitting back and saying, no, what would look good? Now, his plan for 2 bye weeks, I think that's pretty interesting. His plan for a universal bye week at week 13 doesn't make a lot of sense. It's too late in the season because of Thanksgiving. That would be the Thanksgiving game. That would never happen. But I do love the idea of, in my mind, halfway through the season, having a week off, just take that week and do whatever you want there. A Pro Bowl competition in the middle of the season, not a single fan right now listening or watching would want their favorite player to go out and do that. Like, cause you can still pull a hammy on a beach volleyball game. We saw, years ago, we saw a running back at the Pro Bowl in a beach volleyball or beach flag football game tear his ACL. Like you can do any of this. Nobody wants their favorite team participating in it, but I do like a universal bye idea. I think we need to accept 18 games is coming. It's just a matter of how it looks.
It is funny that we've so normalized, and I get it, the violence in sports like basketball or Major League Baseball is so comparatively less that we've normalized the mid-season all-star game for them. And that's what Joe said. It'd be great buzz to have that in the middle of the season like those sports. But in a sport that is this violent, where the bodies are already carrying so much mileage heading into that, you're right. Everyone would just be watching those things, holding their breath. They wouldn't be watching to be entertained. They'd be watching to make sure that their favorite player didn't get injured for the final 5 weeks of the season coming off that universal bye that Joe proposed. So again, I don't think he said anything wrong or anything that hands the owners more keys. I think, like Adam insinuated, This means players are talking about something that unfortunately they know the reality of. There's only so much they can do at the negotiation table against the billionaires with more career longevity who have their eyes trained on 18 games as a shiny new thing that they want.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Jesse Cofield here. We got Jason Fitz. We got Mike Golic Jr. And guys, I'm the only one on this show who has given birth 2 times now. Count them up, 2 times, 1, 2 kids. So I've seen a lot of gender reveals with people my age, and I do have an opinion on them. I think they're trash. And some are good, some are better than others, but we've seen this sort of reveal kind of spill into college football, okay? So the latest one, we have Oregon football commit DeCorian Moore lighting off this firework box, as you can see right here. Now it's burning, the smoke is coming out, and it's green for Oregon, right? So this is kind of like the Pope, where like the chimney goes, you know, and you wait to see the color of the smoke. And my question to you guys is, how has it taken this long for something like this to bleed into the college football commit reveal? Because I feel like now they're only going to get more elaborate the way that gender reveals did, with like planes crashing and dropping the smoke and all that stuff. I personally am scared.
Yeah, Jason, I felt like for a long time, college football, which is normally a bastion of innovation, right? You've got limited resources compared to your NFL counterparts. And so we see college teams do weird stuff all the time on the field in the name of trying to innovate. But recruiting, while on the team side, there's been a bunch of wild stuff, I felt like we kind of reached our peak with the hat game that recruits used to play. And we never really innovated beyond that. So I'm sort of thrilled, 1, that we're doing something different, and 2, that it's not incredibly well produced, right? These were clearly store-bought fireworks. This was clearly store-bought stuff, and it was all shot on iPhone cameras. So it actually warmed my heart a little bit to see it done so analog.
No. If you're going to do it, do it. Like, look, I was down in Jacksonville at the end of June at the Rivals 5-star camp with 100 of the best high school football players in the country. And one thing that really stood out to me is that many of these 100 football players in the country are already very rich business people. Like, that is real. The money that's coming in for a lot of these kids to go to schools and the offers that they're getting, like, they can afford it. You know, you could, if you want to commit, find somebody that's going to turn around and make that video. The rest of your life, you're going to be looking at that video. And the amount of things that could go wrong in that video, the car's right there. All right. Like, that's kind of weird. He had to go behind the car to get the hoodie. Like, these are all production issues, Mike. If you're going to do it right. If you're going to make content, make it right. You should have gone in, gotten a couple of people to film it from some different angles, put it together, fonted the thing, like, did some edits, made it look really super sexy, and then put it out. Let's go.
No, I like just light this box of fireworks on fire and see what happens. What color comes out? I like it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's something simple and pure about this in a way that feels, to me, better for this than even a gender reveal. Like, Jesse, you said it. I've never really been a huge fan of the gender reveals. Quite honestly, the best it's ever worked out for, my brother and his wife, when they had their son Jackson, they did the gender reveal in a slice of cake, and we all got to eat cake. Like, that was the win for all of us, as we used it selfishly as a means to ingest even more sugar in the Golic household. The rest of them seems a bit superfluous and dangerous, but for college football recruiting, this seems right on time. Jason, you mentioned being down there amongst all these recruits. I'm fascinated because this is, another recruit for Dan Lanning in Oregon who have built up this great war chest in the NIL era for doing this. And you talked about the business of college football already seeping into this. How different did that feel down there? And what was the tenor you got away in terms of the way recruits discussed certain schools or discussed their recruitment process that you've seen evolve over the time that we've been covering this?
There were, especially when you start talking about quarterbacks, you're talking about kids in high school right now that know they're about to be millionaires. And I think it really, it's staggering when you think about some of the offers and you hear that, like, through the grapevine, people talking about $300,000 a year for this school, $500,000 a year for this school, like the amount of money that you just hear bannered around. And what really hit me is that most of these kids truly are not kids anymore. Now, Mike, I'm not saying this is a negative, and you and I have talked about this so much. I want to be very clear. Like, nobody ever looked at Justin Timberlake and was concerned about when he stopped going to public school. Like, nobody ever looked at a child actor and said, "Oh my God, what about their taxes?" I think that's just the biggest load of horse, ever, to try and minimize athletes and their ability to earn. So I got to say that loudly. But I did feel like so much of life was business. Even some of the drills and competitions, there were conversations that were happening for some of the kids about whether or not they wanted to compete, because if they lost the fastest man, would it hurt their stock with one of the schools and things like that. But the kid that won fastest man ran a 4.36, and he didn't train for it. He didn't stretch for it. He didn't know the field. He just ran a 4.36. Like, they're better athletes than we've ever seen before, but they're also wildly business oriented.
Man, they're going to start bringing their managers to this stuff. Like, it's a new era.
Some of them do. Like,
really?
I think
already.
They've of course, like, everyth's on the line. Like, if you go into this and look, I think the future of the quarterback position looks bright. Like, just sitting around the kids, watching them throw, it was stunning to watch, a high school kid flat-footed throw the ball 70 yards down the field and hit a target. Like, that's real. I watched that happen. But there's also this moment of, like, there's dads and moms and momagers and stage dads and all those things standing over. There's entourages that are around, and everybody's watching everything because you want to make sure that, that these kids are getting the right film and that it's the right thing and that it represents them the right way. It is truly a business, but also, I was talking to Mac Jones, who was there because we were in Jacksonville, and he's now the backup there for the Jags. And he looked around at one point and he's like, man, these kids now realize that if they do everything right, they are 5 or 6 years away from being generational. They're making money right now, but they're 5 or 6 years away from ridiculous money they could never conceptualize. It's changed. Like, it is a business for 15, 16-year-olds now.
Yeah, the trickle down has been remarkable. Even, the decade and a half that has been between my recruitment and now, it looks like a totally different sport. You're absolutely right. And we've always said it's because they take their cues from everyone else around. The big business of college football got to be too much to ignore. And Oregon, who we just mentioned, is at the heart of that. Washington, USC, UCLA, Texas, all these teams that we've seen as a part of the major conference realignment that changed the foundation of the sport and now has us looking at that between NIL and the transfer portal, then on top of it, Fitz. the players looked around at the schools that saw business opportunities everywhere and busted up the sport to make it happen and said, all right, we've got to take it just as seriously, especially now that money's available to them. And so you do look at the teams getting ready to make that conference jump, Fitz. I'm curious, from what you heard, has it changed the discussion for players around some of the schools that get talked about? Because I think that was a thing that people worried about was this change in consolidation of power in the sport going to change the schools that were readily available or at the top of the list when it came to the players that were going to go there?
I mean, people are still infatuated with Ohio State and Georgia and Alabama, places like that. Did it change Oregon? Yeah, I do believe, because you talk to some of the kids that are looking at Oregon and they look at the schedule and they're excited about the chance to play some of those Big Ten schools, right? So I think that's real. I didn't talk to a lot of West Coast kids, though, in that process. And I wonder how different it is if you live on the West Coast and you don't want to have to travel so much. I think that's a pretty wild part of it. But Mike, what's inspiring to me is, look, a lot of colleges now are hiring essentially a GM to run all of the money and all of these things. But if your college has a solid talent evaluation process and you have a collective, man, if you want to be competitive, all you got to do is raise the money. Like that didn't exist. Like if UNLV ever wanted to create a dominant basketball team, for example, all they need is the casinos to decide they want a dominant basketball team. That wasn't the case 10 years ago. So what I think is inspiring is a school like Oregon now has a bigger conference and they have a huge amount of money to play for. Oregon has more shine today than it did 2, 3, 4 years ago. I think in large part because they're investing in it and because they've got the right momentum going forward. That you control your own destiny more as a school than you ever used to.
Well, and I think they just codified listen, Oregon and a bunch of other schools, college football has always been a story of whose premier boosters came into money at the right time and decided they wanted to do something about it. And for years, it was Phil Knight and it was everything that went on with Nike in that school and the influx of shiny new toys there. And now it's just that, but codified to what you just described there. And it puts a team like Oregon, who, the over-under on DraftKings Sportsbook, 10.5 wins for them. They're expected to come in right away and be one of the best teams in a Big Ten that includes the reigning national champion in Michigan, that includes an Ohio State team that's gone out and raising money, getting players to come back, going and getting former head coaches to be offensive coordinators on their team. And Chip Kelly looks like a juggernaut here. Oregon was ready for this change and structured their operation accordingly, and now they look poised to walk into a new Big Ten and immediately be one of the contenders that gets more recruits to do gender reveal announcements for their team. We'll finish up with this, that, the third next here on GoJo and Golic. All right, guys, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you into the rest of the day. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. If you miss us there, you can catch the best of GoJo and Golic noon to 1 p.m. Eastern, wherever you hear Vincent on the radio. And if you missed that or any of our great guests here, thank you to Yahoo Sports' very own Vincent Goodwill for joining us to talk about Team USA and NBA basketball, and Jason Fitz, also of Yahoo Sports fame, for sitting in and co-hosting today in place of Dad. Check out any of what you missed wherever you get our podcast. And of course, you can check it out right as you get finished with us here live on YouTube on the DraftKings Network YouTube channel. Jason, let's get to this and start off with what we saw. We have Copa America and the Euros going on right now. And right as we start talking about it yesterday, France, who we had basically likened to the Iowa Hawkeyes in college football because they hadn't had any live action goals throughout Euros, but had still managed to get to the semis, finally get dumped at the hands of Spain and at the hands of a 16-year-old. Lamine Yamal becomes the youngest scorer in European Championship history with a 21st minute strike against France, ultimately leading to a 2-1 win for Spain. So pretty wild. Jason, I know you in the music industry got started at a pretty young age. So what were you doing at 16 as a little fiddle player?
I mean, I was earning money in classical music at 16 for sure. But I will say this, Mike. Can you imagine? Because here's the thing, like going out and playing a concert with people, a few thousand people in front of you, that's a very cool feeling. I take nothing away from that. Scoring a goal that makes everybody in your country erupt, like and you're 16, I cannot imagine. Whatever we think of the biggest child celebrities we've ever had, it pales in comparison to scoring a goal in a tournament for your country at 16. That is a level of cool I will never understand.
We can all agree on that. None of us will.
Yeah, no, none of us will ever touch that. That being said, I was distracted because the level of cool. Did you guys see this article in The Guardian about the photo of Leo Messi at 20 years old cradling Lamine Yamal as a little baby? It was 6 months old at the time. It was a charity calendar photo session in the dressing room of Camp Nou in Barcelona that saw the now future Spain star taking picture with, at the time and still one of the greatest soccer players to ever live. That is, we've seen all of the images of like LeBron James with a bunch of the current NBA stars right now when they were at camps, but a baby photo shoot at 6 months old might be the next level or the final boss.
He gave him a bath. He gave him a little bath in his photo shoot. They got the little baby tub, and he's like in the baby tub. Gave him a whole bath, as you can see.
Look at that. That's like the one baby picture that's actually good. Like usually you end up with baby pictures where somebody's naked and it's uncomfortable, right? Like, right. I just like, and look, I'm just not a person that ever looks at, I never have. I don't look at babies. I'm like, oh my God, so cute. That's not my thing. So like, I look at most baby pictures.
That's a cute, chunky baby there.
That's a really cute, chunky baby.
That's cute chunk.
We love a little thick king who goes on to become a star for his country's team and now is going on to the final after beating France in the semifinal.
What's it like when you go back to your friends at 16 and you know that you are far cool? Like, I just can't imagine that moment. Well, like your legend status. Yeah.
What's it like seeing Messi now and knowing the dude's giving you a bath? Like, I do the show every day with a guy that's giving me a bath, but that's because we're blood relatives here. I don't even know if he knows him like that, and that man's seen him naked. That's got to be kind of wild.
It is wild.
You know what's wild? Guys, let's talk about origin stories here, Jesse, and get into Josh Allen, the pass rusher, and a little bit of a name change to update rosters with this season.
Yeah, so the Jags announced Tuesday that Josh Allen is changing his last name, to Hines Allen. So he's going to be Josh Hines Allen to pay tribute to Joshua's maternal side of the family and the other relatives who have worn Hines and Hines Allen on their jerseys. And I'm doing this because we all know why he's changing his name. It's because he's the other Josh Allen. I mean, come on. The Jags didn't have to release any kind of a statement on this. Like, we get it, bro. We know why you're doing it.
You know what? I honestly didn't think about that point in all of this, but you're right.
Great way. Think about that?
You didn't think about that? It's the most obvious thing.
Every time you talk about Josh Allen, the pass rusher, you have to actually say the phrase, the other Josh Allen.
Yeah.
Like, the whole reason SAG-AFTRA, the acting unions, don't allow you, like if somebody else already has, it doesn't matter if your name's Mike Golic. If you go in and register with SAG-AFTRA, if there's another Mike Golic in there, they're like, sorry, you got to be Michael. Like you got to come up with a different, like that's real because the rest of your life, you're the other. He's a successful NFL player and he's the other Josh Allen. Good Lord.
Yeah. That's why he did it.
That was like ESPN's email system. I remember when we were there, my dad was mike.golic@espn.com and I was michael.golic@espn.com. No mention of the junior in there, so you can imagine how confusing that got. Unfortunately, payroll never made that mistake and sent me one of Dad's big boy checks, or I wouldn't be here with you guys right now. I'd be on an island somewhere doing my thing. But I was blown away by the story. You know, his sister plays in the WNBA for the Washington Mystics. He's got other sisters that have played college basketball. In addition, plenty of family members with very accomplished athletic careers that him paying homage to would have made a lot of sense. But you're right, the whole Josh Allen quarterback thing does kind of make an overwhelming amount of sense in this now.
It's a convenient little tale that he wove, but it is a tale nonetheless.
I mean, two things can be true. Like it can be paying homage and also
talented athletic family. I mean, that's not like super
How
convenient. I mean, I've got a pretty talented
him.
family. And
If Josh Allen, the quarterback, was not in the league, this man would not be changing his name, period.
Yeah, that's a fair point. That's a fair point. Jesse, let's get to the third here and talk about Mermaid Olympics so I don't feel quite as dumb.
Speaking of tails, the Merlympics is a thing. And I thought this was like an Onion article, but I went in and read it and it's actually real. So it's been around since 2015, the Merlympics. It's held every 2 years. So Mia Sim of Provo, Utah, she's 22 years old. She has been named the fastest mermaid in the world. She competed at the Swiss Merlympics in Geneva, Switzerland. And I went through and I was just like reading about this. So first, just if you read the article, there's truly some quotes in here that are elite. Like the Merlympics have been around since 2015 and the competition is held every 2 years. Sim has officially been mermaiding for 10 years. So you can use mermaiding in a sentence like that if you want to from now on out. So the way this works is they have to compete in 5 events in the Merlympics. They have to dive down and retrieve trash in a span of 90 seconds to see how much they can get. They have to perform 3 of 10 mermaid figures. Don't know what the figures are. They have to do underwater posing. Okay. They have to do rescue, where they have to do a 25-meter submerged swim and rescue a dummy. And then, of course, there's a speed competition where they race along the water for 50 meters. So if you ever dreamed of competing in the Merlympics.
Thing to me in this is that old girl was the fastest mermaid. She won that. She came in 15th place overall. Like, she leaves a lot to be desired in the other aspects of mermaiding here, Fitz.
Oh, yeah.
Have you guys seen the Netflix show Mer People?
No.
Okay, so there's a Netflix documentary about people who've dedicated their life to being professional mermaids. So like they're like, it's their livelihood, it's the training, it's everything they go through. It is an interesting watch. You know, it's one of those things that I'll admit I was probably a little high when I started it, but I made it through the whole thing. And each time I watched, every moment of it got just a little bit more weird. I'm just saying you should go ahead and watch it. Like there are people that have dedicated their life to trying to get a gig as a mermaid.
Okay, well, I just want to say they're not living the true like if you're going to call yourself a mermaid, then you don't get to take the tail off and walk on land. All right, this isn't the Little Mermaid. You didn't make a deal with the sea witch for your legs.
There's a whole process for that. They have to they come in, they've got the whole tail and they can't be seen without the tail on. And there's
so it's like being a mascot at Disney where you can't take the hat off in front of the kids.
Yeah, except for it's much sadder and you're just sort of thrown into somebody's swimming pool for a 10th birthday party wondering how your life got you there.
Wow.
I mean, listen, I feel like we need to see a Merlympic athlete competing in the pool against an Olympic swimmer just so I can get a gauge for how fast the tail lets them move. Because again, we see the dolphin kicks underwater for swimmers coming out of turns and stuff like that. But I don't know how much extra, do we measure it in knots the tail gives you here? I need clarity on a lot of this, but I think in the lead up, as we get ready for Paris, we know swimming's always a huge draw. What a great way to drum up all of the enthusiasm for the sport by having our land-dwelling friends race against the mer people. If you enjoy this podcast as much as you enjoy mermaids, download, subscribe, rate, review it. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.